it's the old school prairie with the slates. But it makes it easier to see what's going on here. So for math, I think you definitely want to do this in math.
Yeah.
Okay. If you taught a lesson on multiplying negative numbers, okay, you say, okay, so we've done this. I've called on some people to do it with me. Now, on your whiteboards, I want you to do these 3 problems and then hold the whiteboard up for me. 3 times minus 6 minus 3 times minus 5. Minus 2, 4. Okay. All right. So you have them hold up their whiteboards. What I might also do is I might say, if you get done with that, I think I have a session on scaffolding stuff for advanced students later. If you get done with those and they were easy for you, I'm going to throw you a hard problem on the bottom. Do that one too. And then I might do minus 4 times minus 1 3 minus 2. Okay. All right, that'll hopefully keep them busy long enough to help the other kids get through the 3. All right, so then you are looking at the boards, or you could say at this point, you could say, all right, Ben and Julia, when you finish with your seatmate, I want you to compare, and if you've got anything different, talk it out and see who's right. Okay, so that's one way of doing it, and then, or you can have them hold it up for you. All right, so Ben looks good. Julia, let's rethink number 3. Okay, look at it again. All right, so you go around and you say yes, yes, no, no, no. All right, so the whiteboards can be extremely helpful for anything like grammar, math. With languages, I frequently will have them do stuff where I'll have them translate a phrase, do a chant. You guys don't do chants in Latin anymore.
No.
Okay, but you might have them put something in different form. And then you can have, all right, so if this were the direct object, what would it look like? Put it up like this. Okay, so then you actually know whether everybody in the class can do it and not just the 2 people that you called on can do it.
Right.
Okay, and that's the key is we want to teach all of our students, not just the vocal students. So those are whiteboards. Okay, response cards. A for one concept, B for another. I don't know what he's talking about there with those. So I'm going to skip that one. Admit slip. Okay. I taught a history class yesterday. Now we're back, and I want to know what you guys remember from yesterday. All right. On your card, I put a card on everybody's desk. On your card, I want you to write down the 3 causes of the French Revolution. Okay, we went over maybe 5 of them. Write 3, okay, from last class. Then the cards all come in and I go, okay, everybody is remembering. I'm going to be like, good, let's use that as a jumping off spot for our next lesson. Oh my goodness. Only 2 of the 10 kids remember what we talked about yesterday. That gives me a pulse on what everybody knows, okay?
This is the response card.
These are this one, I skipped that one. This is an admit slip. Okay, so those are sometimes also called entrance tickets or entrance passes. So is another terminology people will use for it. I'm not grading it. I'm not remembered, but I know how much I need to review. I could do this with math. I taught a concept yesterday. Okay, maybe we worked on multiplying polynomials, and I just said, okay, everybody, as you're getting your, get your stuff down, and then go ahead and fill out the card with x plus 8 times 2x plus 3 or something like that. And then I see them real quick. Okay, this works too, but this is helpful if you want to be able to have them to flip through. Okay, predictions. Those I think are helpful with things like literature. So, okay, predict what's going to happen in the next chapter now that Holmes and Watson have found this clue. Okay, start getting engagements with that. Or you know how to find average, and you know how to find the area of a triangle. Predict how we would find the area of a trapezoid that I haven't taught you yet. Okay, see if you can think that. So that's used sometimes. I would say literature teachers I've seen use predictions the most. Exit passes. Those are probably my 3rd favorite. Whiteboards are my favorite. Exit pass might be my 3rd favorite. That's like an admit pass, but it's at the end of your class. Okay. All right. So go ahead. For me, we use chants in Latin. So I would say something like, okay, so go ahead now and write down the second declension endings. And when you're done with that, you can leave. All right, and then so you've got their name on it, and I'm flipping through it. I'm like, okay, they were able to do that without looking at their book or something like that at the end of class. Or I could say, probably do things like Sarah and a star, and go ahead and transfer this verb, this to that, and then you can leave once you do that. Then you look at the sentences. That was the lesson. Okay, they're all understanding it. Or maybe I need to reteach it next class because it looks like 3 of them didn't get it. So you have a pile of exit slips. They're not graded, but it lets you know what happened. Here's some examples of things you could tell them. Pretend a classmate was absent. Tell them what was most important from today's lesson. That might be you had a history class or something. You could do it for math. You could do it for language if you want to. But what's the key essential that you're supposed to get from this lesson that you're going to give an absent classmate? Write it down so I can tell what you thought was important. What concept has been most difficult or confusing in this lesson section or reading? So that lets them tell you in a private way what they didn't get. That could be helpful for the next class period to know what you should go over. Write down one question you have about today's lesson. Write down one thing I can do to help you. What do you need to do to prepare for tomorrow's discussion? Write it down. That helps them really think through something that might not occur to them until 5 minutes before the discussion. You help them think that through at the end of the class. Mm-hmm. How did today's discussion go? What do you need to do to improve for next time? So a little self-reflection on the activity that we did in class. Maybe it was a graded Harkness discussion. If you were writing a quiz over today's material, what are 2 questions you would include? Again, you want them to know what the most important thing is. Write down 2 things you learned today. That's another example of something you could put. So in our classrooms, we have a little tub on the teacher's desk that we always stock with Post-it notes and 3x5s, so that you're not impeded from using formative assessments, but you don't have the stuff for it. So even if something comes up to me like, oh, I should check that for understanding, I can just pull them out of the tub and just be like, all right, I need to see to make sure you guys understand. And then our students are supposed to bring their whiteboards with them to every class. So they carry those around in their backpacks and they just bring them so that they always have them. And usually the secondary kids don't have a problem coming up with a marker. The elementary kids, that sometimes they're supposed to have them, and if they don't, sometimes we have to send notes home to the parents if they don't have markers. It's usually not a problem in secondary. So that way, if you keep the supplies in all the classrooms, then you don't have to worry about trying to find them. Yesterday's news, that would be kind of like a fun way of doing an admit slip. Okay, you're writing a newspaper heading for what the class was last time. Okay, just more creative way of doing that than flip. Think, pair, share. This is my second favorite assessment. I use a form of this. I just call it pair and share. But you have 2 students and they're supposed to talk to each other, and then somebody from the pair shares with the group. So this can be a super helpful way of getting kids ready for a group discussion. Whereas if you just start the class and you're like, all right, we're going to talk about this, and everyone's kind of like, oh, I'm the first person to talk. It's really awkward. But if you have them pair and share first, they have so many things to say. Now, all of a sudden, after you say, all right, now one person from your group will dialogue with the whole crowd. So it primes the pump. It gets things going. Read, write, pair, share. So I don't know what he's doing there. They're probably working on an assignment, writing down an idea, and then sharing their ideas back and forth with each other. So it's just a form of the other one. A tell B, B tell A. I do that with memory work. All right, everybody, you have to tell the verse to this person. They have to tell it back, or a math formula or something. All right, just with your buddy, go ahead and do that. I also, in a room set up like this, if you had 10 students, like, it gets a little gimmicky when they're like in 12th grade. But if you had 10 students, stuff works perfectly for 7th and 8th graders. You have table partners, but I would also make a neighbor. So you could say, like, this is your partner, this is your neighbor. So you're not always talking to the same person. Do you guys do assigned seats?
Yes.
So it's a seating chart or no?
It's less up to the discretion of the teacher.
So
But
what is your
oftentimes-
I don't do a seating chart.
okay? And then do you seating chart? So it can mix it up a little bit, so you're not always like parent sharing with the same person. Is that you can say, okay, we're gonna do it with the person behind you now, or something like that. I think that's helpful. Do you guys try to seat kids in your seating charts who are of disparate academic talent or equal academic talent, or is it more about behavior?
But behavior, for sure. With the
Yeah,
boys,
behavior.
we have a class of all boys.
We used to have
I
that.
take
They
the
just
people that
graduated.
hate each other the most, and I put them in opposite ends of the room, and then I fill in as least confrontational.
We had a
as possible.
class with like a ton of girls, and we put like the 4 emotional vortexes at other
Yeah.
corners
Yep.
of the room.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then at 7th and 8th grade, I actually put everyone with a friend because they're quieter. So
Okay.
They talk more.
Well, so behaviorally, sometimes you need to do these things, but like academically, when you're thinking about it, sometimes your gut feeling is I should always put the stronger student with the weak student. And I think that is a bad gut feeling,
I agree.
That's true.
right? And because then the stronger student's going to do all the thinking,
Yeah.
and the weak student's not going to do anything.
Mhm.
So what you really want is the strong strongs together and the weak weaks together with parent share, because in the weak weeks, someone's got to come up with something. We can't both sit here and have nothing.
They will.
And then the strong students, that's really scintillating for them to like ratchet it up and go deeper.
Yeah.
So I would consider doing that
Yeah.
if you're making pairs. Probably for language too. Like the kids who are good at it. They
I
can
just
help
can
kids, but it's good for them.
yeah, you just can focus like with the ones that they don't know a lot.
Oh yeah. You know
So you
immediately.
just can be with them,
you go there.
and the others is like, oh, I know they can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Ungraded quiz entry pass, that's the same thing as an admit slip, basically. It's just like a little, here's an ungraded quiz, 5 questions. 3, 2, 1 cards. This is, you can use this at any point in the lesson, but sometimes it's an exit pass, sometimes it's an admit slip. Basically, kids like things where you, like, okay, you're going to give me 3 important people that we talked about today. You're going to give me 2 places that you should probably memorize on your map, and you're going to give me 1 reason why that war started. Okay, 3, 2, 1. And then it just like it instead of just saying something vaguer to them, they just really like that specificity about what they're supposed to do on it. I don't know why. So 3, 2, 1 cards. You could make it a 3, 3, 2 card, or whatever sorts of numbers you wanted to use. I do not remember ever using raft. Well, maybe I have. I've done like, you're playing the role of Cataline to the Senate, and you're trying to give a speech convincing them that Cicero is the bad guy instead of you, or something like that. But I think that's pretty specific to the humanities, and I don't know how often you do Bible, acting things out. But I haven't used that one that much. Summary writing, you want them to just give you 3 sentences summarizing like coverage. So how many of these so far have you guys used before?
I don't think we really have a very active use, other than like whiteboards and
Okay.
things like that.
Well, and you can get by with only using whiteboards.
Yeah.
As long as you're doing something, but you have to see inside the students' heads.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to produce something for you by talking or writing in some way to let you do that.
Yeah, I think in the past, at least for lit, I would use like homework and homework review as kind of like, or if it was like they read a certain amount of pages, we would review that in the beginning of class, and I would have them say like what they read, and then just kind of like go around and have them like kind of like, okay, you clearly did not do the reading, like kind of just make those kind of notes.
Yeah.
And then
So you're doing like an entrance summary of what you're reading with.
a little bit, yeah. I do kind of like, I like some of these because
You get every teacher gets their favorites, and then you kind of get used to using a couple of them, and you get in a rut, and then I should consult that list and get out of the rut.
yeah.
The kids, I think they find them fun,
Yeah.
then it relieves the tedium sometimes of class.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think there's good ideas in terms of just the fun factor helps, right? It helps the students in their experience in the classroom and stuff. I would say probably the biggest. I mean, you guys feel free to weigh in on this, but I feel like probably most of how we check for understanding, and I think we do a good amount of it. I think teachers do different things depending upon the approach of each teacher, but just a lot of verbal. I think a lot of it's just
And see, the
verbal
trick with that
questioning.
is the verbal. What are you not able to do if it's all verbal? What was the list of what formative assessments should be? Do you remember?
Well, it's not necessarily every single one of them.
Involve all students.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you do the verbal, you have to be really careful that you're getting everybody
Right.
and not just
Right.
discount the fact I don't want to call on those 3 kids because they never have an answer. It's like, well, maybe you're not engaging them enough to think, right? So you can't. So that's why I would say if you just dipstick 3 students each time to check for understanding, you're not doing it well enough. You need to call on everybody.
Yeah.
You don't have time to call on 16 kids or 15 kids, however big your class is, for every single thing.
Sure.
And that's why you want to get something else
I think that's good.
under your belt.
I think a part of what helps us though is just that our classes sometimes can be a bit smaller. So
Yeah.
we really can actually kind of move through. It depends, depending on the class, right? But sometimes we can move through them all.
Yeah.
And kind of randomly check in and make sure. But
Yeah, I don't, especially in the smaller classes, but even in my class of what I think I had 12, right, last year in Algebra 2. Maybe it's because it's math and it's really easy to tell if they're not getting it, right? Like I could ask a couple of students, I could ask the whole class, and I could tell you for sure which ones got it and which ones didn't just by looking at them, right? So, but it's certainly the case in a class of like 5 that every day, if you'd ask me like, oh, who understood what you talked about today? I'd tell you.
Well, I mean, with 5, you can be in a format where you can see
Yeah,
what they're
that's
working
exactly
on
right.
working.
Like
But
I
bigger
know
than
for sure.
that, I think it's important to get something in your where you are getting that quick assessment of
Yeah.
whether they're good.
So I use a lot of times I'll use like an exit ticket
Okay.
kind of idea. So I don't always collect them, but I check them, and then I do it at the end of the week because we only have
When do you
We have-
test on math?
I do regular tests during the week usually, and then I do a quiz every Friday that we
Okay.
don't have a test. And so
Okay.
then that quiz, it is graded, but it's only 10 points. And it works out to be about like 5% of their overall grade. So if they fail it, it doesn't really,
So it's one of
hurt
those
them.
abnormally graded formative assessments. you would
Yeah.
say.
yeah. And so, but what happens is at the end of the week, because we only have like every other day
Uh-huh.
it with math and with everything in the upper school basically,
Uh-huh.
right? Then at the end of the week, I can check and see if there's something that we missed that the class missed as a whole, or if it's just like 1 or 2 students that missed it
Right.
along the way. So, and sometimes I'll do like activities that I use for the same
Right.
thing rather than a quiz where they have to do it on their own,
Yeah.
but like an activity that they could work together.
So you guys both have math. Would your math class look like you working with the group the whole time, or would it look like you presenting the material, working a little bit with them, and then they work on problems by themselves?
So the pre-algebra class, I think we're gonna do it like almost like a flipped classroom,
Okay.
so that and then use like an interactive notebook
Okay.
to have all of the ideas for the students so they can review outside of class, and then in class just work on the actual problems themselves, like the concepts.
So
So-
if it's a flipped class, they're supposed to be doing their lesson ahead of time.
Yes,
So-
outside.
Will you then check for understanding that they understand the lesson when they come in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think would be her best method for checking for understanding?
I think an admit ticket,
Okay.
like an entrance ticket.
Okay.
So doing something at the beginning
Okay.
and then working
And that could
problems.
either look like a sheet of paper you have printed out. It could be something on here. It could be on the whiteboard, but some sort of admit to make sure that they can do the thing they're going to start on.
that they actually read.
So then
The
what do
material
you,
is
so
free.
I'm picking on you because you're new. What do you do then if 3 of the kids fail the admit ticket
Probably redo the lesson.
with the whole class?
I would say
Okay.
so.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, wait, really? Is that
Well-
what you would do?
Well, it depends how big my class is.
Okay.
If I had 22 kids and 3 of the kids couldn't do the math problems, then I would turn everybody loose on their workbook except for those 3 kids.
Oh,
And I'd say, up here, let's try again.
Yeah.
and then I'd work through it with those 3 and then have them demonstrate to me that they could do it. And then I would let them go too. But if it felt like everybody was a little
Well,
shaky,
so Julie only has 6.
you only have 6.
5.
5. Yeah.
So if 3 can't do it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
If 3 can't do it, you redo the whole lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really depends on the size. of the class.
okay, yeah. But then if it's just continual, like,
If those 3 can never do it,
or 6,
yeah.
out of 10, like,
Are they doing the
Yeah.
lesson with a
Well,
flipped classroom?
well, I'm
Well,
just saying,
if-
like,
if
if
it's
like if they
continual,
pull up every day
If
and
it's
not
continual,
done,
the flipped classroom is not working.
Yeah.
right? Okay, well, I'm just more thinking on like a literature level.
Yeah.
Like if they're taking reading home
Mhm.
and they're not coming back with it done.
Right. So what do
Like,
you do when
so
kids
then you
come
just
back
start-
without the reading done?
Well, when it was all 4 of them in one class, I just redid the lesson, but I can't do that this year, and it's annoying.
So how much homework do you guys assign?
A lot, I think.
I mean, on the continuum of classical schools that assign homework and the load level, I would say, it's all relative. It depends on what classical schools you're part of in the past. I've been a part of schools that have had more. I feel like we're about middle of the road.
Okay. So so your 9th and 10th graders, how many hours of homework would you expect them to do with all of their classes every day?
You have that.
I mean,
number.
that's like not to exceed an hour and a half per day.
So I
Okay.
think my goal is like, or everyone's goal is 30 minutes or less.
So they only have 3 teachers.
per day. Yes. Because
Okay.
we have like
Yeah.
3 blocks
Oh,
Basically,
okay.
per
So
day.
then you get to assign homework on the day you teach or on the day you don't teach.
on the day you teach.
I actually
Yeah.
used to assign both, but
Yeah. So when I assign homework, I assign all the homework for the whole week on Monday,
Okay.
and I collect it on Friday, so they don't have any homework over the weekend.
Okay.
And so I take my homework assignment and divide it over a couple of days
Uh-huh.
rather than
Yeah.
all 5, right?
Okay.
So the amount of time I would expect them to spend maybe an hour, if at the most, over the whole week on
Okay.
math homework.
How many pages is a half hour?
it depends on what we're reading and what grade it is.
Uh-huh.
But I think what Troy told me was like, I think I'll try and do like, and sometimes it wouldn't work out that way,
20
but like,
pages or
yeah, it would be like 7 to 15. I think again, like
Okay.
we're reading like really hard
So
stuff.
do you read in class and then you assign a little bit for outside of class?
Yeah.
Is sort of the
Yeah.
format. I like to do that. That's a good
For
format.
Mr. Martin, it's always 10 pages a day.
Okay, yeah, that's.
But
what
it's
he-
like 20 pages for a block.
right. So it's like
Okay.
it's like okay, so two, like I don't see them again until another 2 days.
Yeah.
So is that an assignment that is getting graded to read that? I guess I'm trying to
Yeah.
work with your problem
No,
not
yeah.
getting the reading done.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, especially readings, like we used to do like annotations where they would
Right.
annotate the book, but then it's like you can just underline stuff. And
Yeah.
and on top of that, I don't really think I like that model anymore for other reasons. But then sometimes I'll give them a worksheet, and then it's like, okay, you have to fill out the worksheet. But then it's like I'm only doing that because some of the kids won't do the reading,
Yeah.
and then like the other kids are doing the reading.
Right.
And so I don't know. And then it's like also like I don't want to create like something every single day.
Right.
And so it's like I do just want to say like, hey, read from here to here. And then sometimes I'll have a quiz. So what I'm thinking is more like quizzing on that reading.
So what we do is we do a reading check, which is like, as God is my witness, I read this.
Oh,
We
yeah.
talk to the kids about the importance of honesty, and that's a smallish portion of the grade. So maybe it's 5%, 10% in the literature class.
Okay.
And so some teachers like it to be private, and so they say, everybody close your eyes. raise your hand if you completed the reading all the way.
I
That
don't.
was the
I won't
sign.
believe them.
And so we close their eyes and does,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
I some kids I would do that, but yeah.
Well, I mean, if you can't believe them,
Mhm.
that's another problem. So then you have something else that confirms later on
Okay.
whether it's happening or not. But like you said, you don't want to do like a quiz every single day
Yeah.
on the reading. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I would do something like if you have this 5 days a week, 3 days a week,
2 to 3.
2 to 3 days a week.
Mhm.
So then I would say either every week or every other week, you should probably have a graded discussion for the whole class period.
Okay.
And then that will let you know if
Yeah.
they actually
Yeah. Okay.
are
That's a good idea.
reading the stuff. And so that's one of the things on here. Do you guys see the discussions? We'll jump there now.
Okay.
Discussions, value lineup, confer, compose, clarify, directed discussion, and Harkness discussion. So you were talking about kind of Socratic. That's more of a directed discussion.
Yeah.
And then Harkness is a student-led discussion.
Okay.
So
Wait, is there a book about that?
Somewhere, I don't know of one.
we're doing a session on Friday at 11:10
Uh-huh.
about Socratic instruction and Harkness discussion and what the differences are. And then
Okay.
I have a bunch of prompts examples
Cool.
for it. So let's save that. So
Yeah.
are you going to be here for all the training days?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Because I know some of the teachers are hopping in now. So we'll hit that then. But that Harkness discussions are a really good way of figuring out if kids are actually comprehending books.
Okay.
I know some schools use them for math. So I have never figured out how to do that successfully. But Veritas apparently and Newburgh, they use them for math. I'd love to watch one. I don't know how to do it. All right, so jump to sticky notes on board. You guys see that heading?
Mhm.
That's a really fun one that you can use. I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, so like science, you're doing 4th grade mammals, reptiles. You're trying to sort animals by things. Different people get assigned different animals, and then they have to go up and put them in the board in their correct, what do they call them, phylum or whatever, something like that. And then it's visual. It's on the board. Maybe you have them write in Sharpie so everybody can see. And then you can go like, all right, so Luke, are you sure that goes in rodentia? All right, what are the characteristics of a rodent? Okay, so he tells you, does this animal have that? All right, oh no, it doesn't have that. Okay, so what are some other places that we could put a hair? And so then it's like, oh, I think they should be lagomorphs. All right, so then they get up and they visually move the Post-it note from your rodentia column to your legomorphs column. And it gets the kids up and out of their seats. And it's really good for sorting things. So that's kind of a Post-it note sort of example. In discussions, sometimes I will give kids Post-it notes. And you guys don't have, so 15 is your biggest class? Is that what you're saying
Yeah.
for discussion? 15 is really big to have a class discussion with. So you may want to have your A student, and not A and B, but like they're bad. But you have your pink group and your yellow group.
Mhm.
And so pink group is in for these 3 question prompts. Yellow group is in for this. So you give everybody one, so they visually know what color they are and which group they get to discuss with. So Post-it notes can be really handy ways to get that kind of thing going with the discussion. Sometimes I give students Post-it notes and you only have 3 Post-it notes. So you can only say 3 things during the discussion. So they're right in front of them. And so,
That's what I do.
and then they know when they've talked or not in the discussion, not because here's my 3 Post-it notes and I never put one in as I was talking. So visually they can think, oh, I should probably participate in the discussion here. So I
That's
use these
good.
for tons of things. What else does he use them for? Let's see. Compare, contrast. Oh yeah. So you can be like, okay, examples of virtue, examples of vice. Get it on a Post-it note, sort it on the board. Okay. Different kinds of characters in the last three books that we read. All right. Is it a protagonist? Is it an antagonist? Is it a foil? Is it, something like that? Okay. Write their name and put it up on the board. So you can do all sorts of organizing things like that. Curated discussion. 3 Old Testament crimes, 3 groups, 1 crime for each. Oh, so you're having different groups do their own discussions with each other. And this might be with math or with translation or something with languages. They could each be working on different things. And then after they finish their discussion together, they present. I like this a lot because it gets even more kids talking. I had a class last year with 15, and I would separate them into groups of 3 or 4 a lot of times and have them work on stuff in a discussion together. And then everybody gets a lot of talking in. And then we would come together as a group, and then we would share what we had found. So again, the student is in the role of the anticipator, the learner, instead of the teacher doing all the thinking for them. And the smaller the group is, the more they get to talk. Graphic organizers. Okay, do you expect the student, when you're teaching something, to come up with how to organize the information on notebook paper or something? Or do you give handouts that are some sort of organized way for them to write it? I do both, but has anyone used graphic organizers for anything?
What do you mean by graphic? Like a
So
handout?
okay, so like for example, a lesson I taught towards the end of the year is we were finishing up church history, and we needed to go over like current denominations and which ones were similar and what they did. And so I was like, okay, we could just go through this big list, which would be really boring for them, and the Baptists and then Methodists, or I could plot out this thing with boxes for them to fill in as we go. So it took a little more thought on my part. We had Eastern Orthodox, which was in a box. So I gave them a blank box form. Looked like this. And then they had different Protestant categories underneath. So this was Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Protestant. We focused mostly on Protestant in America. And then we put things together that are similar. Okay, so which column? Anglicans, Presbyterians, let's put them, they're more similar to each other, whereas Pentecostal is more over here, and that sort of thing. So I'm giving them something to help organize their thoughts instead of them having a blank sheet of paper to take notes on. Yeah. Some kids will spatially see things like that in their head, and some kids, it's just a mess of notes on their paper. So if you can come up with a way to organize the information for them, a graphic organizer can be helpful. Cornell notes. Have you done those? Okay, so this can be used in sciences and maths as well as humanities, but you teach the kids to get a line on the paper here, and you could write your math formula. Okay, I'm doing something simple because I'm not up in calculus right now. All right, so we're doing the formula with sort of circles. We've got a radius. We've got a diameter. We're writing our formulas. Pi r squared equals area. We've got 2 r pi equals diameter. We're taking notes from what the teacher is communicating to us. On this side, we put either keywords or questions. What is a radius? What is the diameter? What's the formula for area of a circle? Or just formula for area of circle. So this is kind of like my index of stuff that I need to know from the lesson. So it teaches kids to take the important stuff they took notes on and put it out here. What would a teacher test you on this lesson? When I taught biology, I required Cornell notes. Here's all the parts of the flower in here. Parts of the flower right here. Okay, and then, maybe I have different monocots, dicots, and then you say over here you have 1 seed, 2 seeds, sort of tabs. Down here, they're supposed to write a summary. And this only works if you have a lot of information on the page. But in like a 1 or 2 sentences, you say, what did I learn about this? Can I actually summarize that information? I will not say that the kids love doing Cornell notes, but it did help a lot of kids, and I had a few continue to use them in classes where they weren't required because they realized that this helped them organize their thoughts. So that is one way to do it, but they will not naturally pick it up and all do it unless they're required. In order to do that, then you have to, like, every 2 weeks, every time I had a science test, I said, turn in your Cornell notes. And while they were taking the test, I was like, flip, flip, flip. Good. Flip, flip, flip. No summaries. Okay, you got marked down for that. And I had to look through it and I had to grade it in order to make it happen. But it is a nice graphic organizer for kids to figure out how to organize information.
I use it depends on the class, but for geometry, I use an interactive notebook. So
what is that?
It's where I make the notes for them, basically. So it's like every lesson is almost every lesson. There are a few times that I'll have them write down some notes in their book, but almost every time I give them a handout and they put it in their notebooks. And then I give them the notebook. And so then they divide up the notebook by chapters or units.
So what you're teaching, you put on a handout for them that day.
And so sometimes it'll be like almost like fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll be big open boxes where they're going to write things down. But the way I check it, rather than having to collect them, I tell them, if you have your notebook, you can use it for the test.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they're like very inspired.
Our 8th grade history teacher does that. If they have their Cornell notes, they can use them for the test.
Yeah.
So whatever they got on there.
So they're like it works really well.
Yeah.
And especially for geometry, because there's so much memorizing.
Right.
Otherwise. And I need them to memorize some things, but I don't need them to memorize everything.
Right.
And so so that way they have like the other thing, the reason I started doing it in geometry initially is because it's hard for them to draw things in their notes. And so like I can draw a circle on the board, but they're going to struggle to draw a circle in their notes. And so if I can give them one that's already drawn, then they can.
Do you have trouble with them keeping the handouts that you give them, or is it
No,
pretty good about filing it?
I keep usually I keep glue in the classroom.
Okay.
So they can just, after they write it on it,
Yeah.
then they can just glue it straight into their notebooks.
Okay.
So it's not like
so the graphic organizers take more time, right?
Mhm.
You have to make your lesson plan, and then you think, how is the student going to think this into their own mind in a way that's not just me giving them a handout to read? It's like they are doing the work, not me doing the work, but they are really good. And I think once you've taught a class more than once, it's a little easier to come up
it's
with
way
it.
easier.
Yeah.
You're not having to come up with realize like, oh, I don't have something for this lesson, so I have to make it today.
Right.
You know,
I
so
did a
can-
graphic organizer for, we were talking about Count Monte Cristo earlier,
Oh yeah.
but, so family trees, that was kind of important for that because everything was crazy with the characters. And then I had sections for them to put quotes about vengeance that later on we were going to write a argumentative paper about vengeance. So you need to collect quotes as we go along. And so just different things like that. But you can't really do it the first time you've taught it because you're not sure what you're trying to do yet with it. So, but if you've read the book before, you can make a graphic organizer to go with it.
I like doing I think I like doing that a lot, but it is like a lot of work.
It is. When I taught the Odyssey, I made one, and like the chronological history of the journey and the map and stuff that goes with it. And then I pulled in a bunch of modern poems about the Odyssey, and so we could dissect like what is this saying about Penelope and Odysseus? How is that like or different from the book and things like that. But they loved it whenever I gave them. I'm like, oh, is there a packet for this book? I'm like, no.
It's fun putting pictures in it.
It is fun.
And yeah.
All right, what's my time? Oh, we're out of time. So, I would really suggest doing some sort of formative assessment that lets you check everybody at once. And I did a lot of talking here. I'm sorry. I should let you guys talk more. But if you have these, use them.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Rose. So now do we
I think
we take
we
a
have
little break and then he's
and
going to
then
come, Dave's
I
going
think
to come here
David's going to come in here
for classroom management.
classroom management.
Yes. Great.
I think he's doing principles today, and then you get scenarios.
Good. Yes.
We've got a lot of good scenarios for you.
Yes. Good.
I think that there's those whiteboards. I think we have a bunch
Yeah.
back there.
I know that
Stack
Sarah
them.
uses them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you issue them to the kids or keep them in the classroom?
No, we keep it.
Okay. So then they would just, when they came into this room, that one they need to be handed out.
Yeah.
would
Although I
really
do like
suggest
that
doing
I-
every single class. Yeah.
I do like that idea of getting them to get it themselves.
Yeah.
Because sometimes too, it's like they treat them like trash, the ones that are the schools. But if it's like theirs, they would keep it
Mhm.
nicer.
Not always.
And
Not
they,
always.
Not
and they
always.
can use them for different classes. So instead of just being carrying the ones that we have to another classroom, they just can be using.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If
I
they
think,
do, they carry
think they
backpacks
should.
around to their classes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so they could just have
Some
them.
of them.
Yeah, some,
I don't know
You
why.
guys don't have lockers.
We do,
we do.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but not for like every student 7th through 12th grade because there's only so many of them.
And some of them don't want.
And we've gone through phases where we haven't had lockers too.
Yeah.
Or
we
the
don't have.
lockers were
We
too
used to,
small.
and we don't have lockers
So,
right now, so they
yeah.
carry everything around. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I will
Thank you.
head down to the other room.
I thought I saw it. In my mind, I was like, no.
Ben, you need to get a porcelain whiteboard for this.
Oh, yeah,
I
the
know,
whiteboard is
Rose, it's
really
horrible. I don't know
bad.
what's going on with that.
That one's just, yeah,
Like that.
We do. We need to get a porcelain whiteboard.
be nice.
David is a connoisseur of whiteboard. So a lot of people are like, "What? I don't want to spend that much money on these things." Oh, whiteboard. Spend
Well,
$1,000.
Seriously, does it for this size? It costs like $1,000.
I think it's
Yeah,
That's
maybe
crazy.
more.
They're
Dave's
really
whiteboard that he has in
Yeah.
his office is glass,
Oh, the
And
glass
it's-
ones
it's
are really
beautiful.
expensive. Yeah.
but
Oh, Abe has a glass one.
it's a beautiful whiteboard.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Really heavy. But you know,
That's
government
cool.
paid for
It is
so-
NPS after all.
Yeah. Right, where you gotta spend your money or you're gonna lose it. So
Yeah, exactly.
you buy fancy whiteboard.
I should need to go to
Wonder if that's our worst whiteboard.
I think it is. It's pretty close if it's not.
Yeah, this is, I think, probably the one, like, the worst one, I think.
It's been bad for as long as it's been on this wall.
Wow.
So this classroom used to be 2. And I think this was the one, it was actually just down here. Oops, down that way.
Mm.
And then when they took out the wall right here, they scooted it towards the middle. So it was not good back then.
Might be a part of it is the erasers.
Yeah.
The erasers, like. Julia, would you mind getting me like one of the erasers from one of the whiteboards in the portable, actually?
Sure.
Thank you.
And there's a way you can like recondition a whiteboard,
Yes.
but I don't remember. what
I
it
think
is.
Janice sometimes actually uses some WD-40,
Yeah. Mhm. That's
actually.
one thing you can use. But I had to do, so the whiteboard that's in that classroom is the one that came from NPS.
What?
Abe, you didn't know that? Yeah, so the one that's in that room right there.
Really?
On the wall, yeah, it came from NPS.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and it was like an extra one that they were gonna throw away, and I actually used it when, pretty sure that was the one that I used whenever we were over at Santa Cruz Baptist,
Oh,
and I taught outside, and so my class would carry the whiteboard outside and then back inside every single day. So it's taken a beating, but
wow.
after all that.
Thank you.
So I had to do some serious work on that though after it found a home inside.
Oh,
Outside.
that works.
That one's better.
I think those other ones are just so dirty that it just spreads.
Yeah.
Mm.
And my advisor in grad school, we only had chalkboards in the math building
Oh,
at
wow.
Texas Tech because math people love chalk. And so he would, whenever he'd be on the board, he would erase and then he would scrape the eraser onto the tray every single time. And I was always like, what is he doing?
Oh,
But it's to get the chalk off of the
Right.
eraser so that when you erase it, it's cleaner. You're not just like spreading chalk all over the place.
that makes sense.
And so I teach on a chalkboard now at NPS a lot of times.
Oh.
And I don't right now, I have the whiteboard, but
Okay.
I find myself doing the same thing.
Oh,
like
that's so
scraping
funny.
the chalk down.
Oh, how funny.
All of Grove City classrooms are.
Are they
chalkboards.
chalkboard?
Do you like it better?
In college I did, but in high school I remember it was a really small classroom and we had a chalkboard and you could hear the
Yeah.
chalk like
Uh-huh.
very
It's really
clearly.
loud.
Yeah, and it just
Yeah.
like would give me the ick.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it can be really distracting.
yeah.
Like even if you just get a kind of a weird piece of chalk.
Yes,
And
yeah.
it's like straight through the chalk, it's making this weird noise. So and some chalk doesn't work,
Yeah.
it's not dark enough that you can see it or whatever.
But when you're far enough away, it's like
Mhm.
it's good. And it's much more I've had professors like talk about it and it's just like there's nothing like this. It's like very like it's always clean
Right.
and like good, in a good status, I guess.
Yeah, and the way chalk feels on a chalkboard, it like feels more like writing on paper
Oh really?
than a whiteboard.
Yeah.
Because there's like there's so little friction
Oh,
on the
yeah.
whiteboard, but there's friction
On
on
the
chalkboard.
Mm.
And so it has like a nice kind of slows you down a little bit,
Yeah.
which is always good for students. Right?
That's
Not writing so
an
fast.
interesting point.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I sometimes, the class that I teach at NPS is very fast paced, right? But I find myself writing super fast sometimes
Oh.
because I can on a whiteboard. I can just like, yeah.
How many classes are you teaching?
I just have one. Technically,
semester?
it's two, because it's two. They get 2 grades, but it's still just in 10 weeks. So the first 5 weeks is one class, and the second 5 weeks is the
Oh my
other.
gosh.
And so the first 5 weeks is calculus 1, and the second 5 weeks is calculus 2 plus linear algebra. So it's what you would normally take in college in like over a year. Yeah. They learn it.
That's what you
or
need to
they
do,
do it in
Julia.
weeks.
Just pop over there.
Just get it
Just like you just be her like assistant. She's just your assistant.
out. You know,
That's what you'll tell everybody else. But then in reality, you'll just be like,
yeah. So I have 28 students in my class, which is that's a lot.
Whoa.
And it's this classroom that it spans 2 floors, so it's like an auditorium seating.
Oh.
Oh wow.
So they have tables, but it's like really,
That's funny.
yeah. So I go in there every time. At least the bottom entrance is on the floor where my office is. So I don't worry about tripping down the stairs as I'm coming in or something. But it's a weird classroom. So you get down to the front and you're like, hello, all you people looking at me. So they're all like, you know, military officers. So, big. A lot of them are really big.
You always have to be in uniform when they.
No,
Go to
they have
class?
to be in uniform on Tuesdays. So every Tuesday.
You have to wear a uniform?
Mm.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have to. So. But they're funny. They're very like super respectful all the time. So
Well, good.
and, yeah. So I was laughing yesterday because I had like 3 emails in a row from students that just all came at once, and every single one of them started with "Thank you, ma'am" or "Good morning, ma'am" or whatever. All 3 of them.
Oh,
Wow. Hey.
Don't hear that very often around here.
Must be so
Yeah.
refreshing.
In the South, you hear that. I hear that all the time. But that's not in California,
Right.
unless you are with the military. Community.
So, rumor has it you guys already had your break?
Yeah.
So
Some
Excellent.
took it, some we just been kind of checking. I've been trying to clean that board. It's got problems. We've been talking.
I know. Joy of the whiteboards. Okay, so we'll be on page 10. And so there you were. You guys did all your planning. You have a perfect school plan. You got your SWOBOT up on the whiteboard. Everything's going perfect. You got your curriculum all set. And then Johnny in the back starts drawing swastikas on somebody else's board. Susan and Jane are gossiping about Sally, right? What's happened to your perfect plan? And it's sin. Sin is what has happened. Shalom is a favorite word of mine. It's already been brought up. It's like, what is shalom? It's like the way things are supposed to be, right? It's the right relationship with God and man. It's we were in the garden with God in fellowship with God, and then we broke it. We broke it. So what is sin? So we have a definition of sin.
Many different ways, right? Many different ways of defining it. What would you all say?
Well, I know the catechism.
Say it.
Should it?
Sin is any want of conformity unto or transgression of the law of God.
Right.
Bam.
Good. I like it. Yeah. And like I like that. One of the books I read on sin, it's like not the way it's supposed to be. It's like a broken fellowship. So we have to know what we are dealing with sin. And I'm pretty tired of the term natural consequences, which is what every parent kind of tells me nowadays with how they deal with discipline at home when they do new family interviews. It's like, oh, we use natural consequences. Nobody mentions sin anymore. And so we're working really hard at school to define things as sin and name sins. Are we stuck in our sin? No. Why? How are we not stuck in our sin? So we've broken our fellowship with God. Is that the end of the story?
If we ask for forgiveness,
Right.
we will be forgiven.
Right. We have a mediator through Christ. So how do we get out of sin is through repentance. One of the most useful things that was ever taught to me was the idea that kids sin and they get in trouble. And my job as a disciplinarian, as a head of school, is to help kids get out of trouble. Your job as teachers is to help kids get out of trouble. They've gotten themselves into trouble. Your job is to get them out of trouble. And so we shared a little part of our handbook, and there's a few things I wanted to point out on page 10. Students and teachers both should conduct themselves in a manner that displays Christian love and respect, both in school and when involved in extracurricular activities. You can't be nice to the kids at school and then be jerks in your personal life. Sorry to say, that doesn't work. Students are expected to show honor and respect to their teachers as they would their own parents, right? We teach with the authority of the parent. God has given those kids to that family. It's called them to raise them in the fear and admonition of the Lord. We are a tool to do that. We're a hired help. We are Alfred in the story. We're not Batman. You don't get to save the day. You don't get to be Christ to the kids. You don't get to save them, but you do get to serve them, right? Batman, should probably be the parents, right? They should be the hero in the story, and we serve them. Now, Batman can't be Batman without Alfred, but we're kind of Alfred in the story, and it's a good part to be. But the ultimate purpose of all discipline at our school is never punishment, shame, or revenge. Instead, the end goal of any disciplinary action ought to be forgiveness, restored relationships, and the resumption of an orderly educational environment in the classroom. So that's the principle. That's what I think about whenever I get this new thing that some kid invented how to misbehave at school, or we're dealing with common sins. It's like they've gotten to sin. I know how to get out of sin because Christ has taught me that. He's given us our scripture. So my job is to get to confession of sin, repentance of sin, and restitution. So what is restitution? Restitution is making right what you have wronged, in the sense of like maybe you owe the teacher an apology. Maybe you owe your friend an apology, right? Often to little kids, Christ loves to forgive us, and so should our friends. Let's go apologize. And that's the restitution. It's not like go wash my car or do something of that nature. So we want to avoid, punishment for the sake of punishment. I'm going to publicly shame you because you wrecked my curriculum, or I'm going to get my revenge. I'll share with you, this is one of my favorite books. It's called Proverbs for Parenting, and it's all the Proverbs listed out as in categories or contents. So self-control is like part 3. It has anger, diligence, drinking, envy and jealousy, fear, greed and covetousness. So I can find all the Proverbs that pertain to that topic. So often I can talk to the kids like, okay, what happened? I did this. Okay, what is that? And like, what does God have to say about this? So I can pick a proverb that fits what the situation is and say, this is what God said about this. We've broken that, we've sinned, and we need to repent. And it protects me from being behavioralistic, like David's school of behavior, right? And so it grounds me in scripture, and it also gives us a common language, and it also gives me things to keep in my back pocket. So I know what I'm going to say about mischief. I know what I'm going to say about self-control because I got a proverb for it. And you guys do older kids, which is more complex than younger students. But even the youngest students can understand what a castle is, and why a castle without walls is ridiculous. It doesn't serve its function. The same way a man or a woman that doesn't rule their spirit is as ridiculous as a castle without walls, right? Everybody can kind of grasp that, and it's very helpful for me. So I encourage, if you struggle with like, I don't know what to say when, or if you want more tools. I'm kind of embarrassed as a parent that I don't use Proverbs with my own kids more, because it's like God's wisdom is there for us, and it's like this is how we should raise our kids, and I'm trying to invent my own parenting style or parenting wisdom sometimes, because I should just go back to the Proverbs. So okay, so that's kind of big picture. We want to get to that repentance. We want to help kids get out of trouble. So what does that mean? How do we do that? Well, interesting, we go back to Ephesians 6:4, and God writes something very fascinating, right? And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. He starts with not provoking your kids. If I was a pop psychologist, or if I was like at the school, I would start with the kids. Why don't we let's just address their problems? God, interestingly, starts with us provoking. So we're going to spend some time going and thinking about ways we provoke our students, which leads to bad classroom management. And then we'll move on to the students a little bit too, but provoking ways that make classroom management more difficult. Wrong expectations of children. What does that mean? Have you guys ever thought of, seen, what is a wrong expectation? And how can that provoke them?
Kids should never spill the milk, ever. I mean, that's like in a home context,
Yeah,
kind of thing. I mean, less in the classroom. But this is the first thing that came to my mind, is that kids are parents that just have to have no messes. Like everything needs to just be like buttoned up all the time, and that is impossible for little children who are clumsy and
Yeah.
just they're clumsy and they'll spill. Stuff like that.
Right. Have this like inhumane view of what they are. Right. I will say in the secondary grades, one of the biggest ways I think we can do this is to use the same teaching method as if they were in elementary or lower elementary.
Yeah.
Especially with older students and challenging in the classroom. Young boys in particular will often challenge things that you say in the classroom. This is not always bad. I personally like a little intellectual judo. Like I have to wrestle with an idea, and if you say something I don't agree with, I go, "What? What do you mean? Is that right?" And even shocker, the kids will be right and you will be wrong. Sometimes.
It's the worst.
You ever seen that? Like I've done it. Like and there's a way to deal with that where you're like threatened by that, right? And you're like, why is this kid challenging what I'm saying? And he's just actually doing what you want, which is thinking, right? And maybe his method is wrong, and maybe if he does it all the time, you might have other things to worry about there. But you should have expectations that these are going to be thinkers. My 11th and 12th graders, I'm a little scared of them. I cannot put any teacher in front of them because they will think circles around untrained or teacher that's not ready to bring his A game. So we have to respect that. So that, it can go south, but, let's have the right expectations. We want the kids to have freedom, but it could get messy. Lack of class preparation, right? If you come in, as the bell rings, throwing stuff out, kids will know if you're not prepared, they'll pick up on that. And it's a disservice to them, right? And it can make the class harder because you're both trying to teach your class, think what you're going to teach your class, and manage the kids. So wrong level of work to plan. We talked about that a little bit. All logic level material and grammar level classes are vice versa. We talked a little about that. Are we teaching to the appropriate level of the student? No consideration for the range of students within the class. Slow learners and fast learners. What do we think we mean by that?
Like getting frustrated when the fast people are like goofing around because they've
Right.
been done for like an hour.
Right.
Or whatever it is.
And you've had no plan for them to be ahead. And so we've tried to attack this with certain ways of having fast finisher work. My best example is kind of in math, which is the most clearest example of it. But a teacher can put 3 problems on the whiteboard, and one is the problem that they need to learn and figure out. It's pretty simple. The next one might be a little bit harder, but everybody should kind of get it. Maybe the slow kids are going to be working on one a little bit longer. But the third one is going to be hard, right? And it's the kids that blow through the first 2 are going to run into a challenge, and they'll keep them there for a little while. And they'll enjoy it. They're like, okay, now I get it. This is actually hard for me. But we premeditatedly set that up so that they can run into, you want the kids, if they can run, to run fast, right? Within the context, we teach a whole class, not cater to individuals. But it'd be a shame if we put an anchor on all our kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We want them to be able to run because God has gifted some of these kids. And it's fun to let them see what they can do. So I would encourage you to think about that. Okay, no setting of expectation for the students. Student expected just to know how to behave. This is a good one. We work a lot in the first few weeks of school. What people sometimes forget, though, is other times that the students need to be retrained on how to behave or what the expectations are. So I try to remind the teachers coming back from spring break, your kids have had a break, especially Christmas break is long. I know you want to get back to your curriculum, but maybe you're going to have to spend some time. Let's relearn how to do transitions. Let's get them reoriented. I think it was Chesterton who was talking about how how the sun comes up every day, and maybe it's just because God enjoys doing the same thing over and over. He just enjoys the sun coming up every single day. As grown-ups, we tend to lose some of that, and kids will sing the same song over and over and over and over, and we're like, you're killing me. Maybe we just need to enjoy doing the same thing over again sometimes, and get that joy of a sunrise coming up every morning. It's hard, but like that's something that might make our classrooms more joyful. Taking the time to I have multiple times planned where we're going to reiterate the standards that I want for them. I like to use a sports analogy with all women teaching because I figure who doesn't like sports? A soccer coach, right? A soccer coach does not teach a kid how to kick a ball through the goalie 3 times and say, we're good, we got it. You don't ever have to kick this ball through the goal again, right? They will kick that ball 1,000 times, 10,000 times, over and over and over. So maybe we need to bring some of that and just remember, that's not a fail. That's drill. And drill is classical. It's like sports teams actually tend to be more classical than our education system. So love of doing the same thing over and saying the rules again. So we have to tell them more than just the beginning. Inconsistency with enforcing classroom rules. This is a good one. We tend to find, I think, people fall into 2 kind of ditches. You're either too lenient or you're too strict. So you got to all go ask people you trust, am I too lenient or am I too strict? And kind of figure out where you fall, but be self-aware of that, right? So the unlimited warning, hey, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Please don't do this. And then you're mad, why is this kid not picking up the clear signals that I am sending? And we tend to think that's the most merciful thing because, I wouldn't want to send him out of the classroom, right? That's, everybody's going to ooh and ah, right? So we're I'll just be nice and give this kid unlimited warnings when she's actually cool. Sniping, right? I'm going to cover it in love, and then I'm really mad about it. And I'm going to, hey, you stop. And in your head, you're like, shut up. You know what I mean? That sniping, you have to avoid. It doesn't go well. Avoidance of using the school disciplinary system. I have found that sometimes teachers will get frustrated in a situation I don't know what to do with this kid. He's always talking out of turn. He won't stop talking. Or he's always doing something. I'm like, did you send him to the office? And they're like, no. And I'm like, I have a job. I'm here. I'm there for you. Or I didn't. We use a yellow and a red note system in lower elementary, not in secondary. In secondary, it's much more interpersonal conversation because they are much closer to adults. So did you send them out of the room so that you could talk to them later? You're like, oh no, I didn't do that. And so oftentimes teachers will not use the tools designed to get the outcome that they want. So avoiding the system, not messaging parents. Lo and behold, this kid has been struggling with something and you have never messaged a parent about it. Because ultimately, whose responsibility is to disciple and discipline the student? Parent. The parent. So I would encourage you to communicate to the parent well. I was going to say, one of the principles that I've always really liked is to think a teacher should never know anything about the student that the parents don't. So we are not secret confidants of the students, but they will use you as that way sometime, right? And there's times when I've had conversations where I was like, I think I need to go talk to the parent. I probably have to go talk to a pastor. This kid is crying out for help and bringing something to me, but I am not going to keep this to myself, right? I'm not going to take on the role of a parent because I'm not the parent. I'm not going to take on the role of the church, which sometimes people forget. There's pastors and there's spiritual guidance that they need that is outside of our ability. So I've always tried to keep that rule and I let the kids know too. Like we let the kids kind of know. I'm like, hey, I'm happy to help with this. Just so you know, what we're saying is not private between you and me. And I think that's really good because it can quickly get quite complex with older kids. And later we're going to do some scenarios, and so we'll have some fun playing with those and see what we get out of that. But I just want to set kind of principles right now. Okay, so improper reactions to classroom management issue, anger and harshness, right? That is not going to serve you well. It is not going to get to confession, repentance, and restitution. Harshness is an interesting one. It can be unintentional. So at my school, I ended up buying bullhorns for recess because we have a huge field. And it tends to, I can do a pretty good loud command voice and be neutral. In my experience, some of the females, when they get really loud, it's shrill. And like they don't mean it at all, but it sounds harsh, like you're yelling at the kids across the playground when you're just trying to be loud, right? So I run into that a little bit. It's like, oh, that just sounds wrong. And there was no kind of harshness intended, but it sounded that way. I have an admin, like she'll correct the kids from running across the walkway, but it doesn't sound right. It sounds like she's angry at them. And it gets into people's personalities and their voices and stuff like that, and you can't always help with that, but we have to be on the lookout for it. So am I sounding harsh? Am I sounding angry with the kids? And lots of times the anger is because we let something build up by neglecting it. So that's a good clear. Fear of students, of parents, or perceptions, right? Like, what will they think if I deal with this? I had a really fun experience with PDA in my school. I don't know how you guys deal with PDA, but we pretty much just said we're a professional environment. It's banned. Like you don't show PDA in school grounds. We're professionals. It's a work environment. That would be inappropriate. We don't make out in front of you. Don't make it out in front of us.
Like your staff or your
Yeah,
students?
because my wife and I are married and work at
Oh,
the school.
okay.
I joke that like we don't make out in front of you. Don't make out in front
So
of
you're
us.
saying that to the students?
To the
Okay,
students.
okay.
Yeah. So anyways, our school is like, we don't have PDA. We think it's unprofessional. But we had a rash of it. And, I took the students aside one time. It's like, hey, this is why we're professional. I gave them the whole spiel and talked to them. And they kept doing it. And then like I had to get the parents involved. But also it was happening in the classroom dynamic all of a sudden it happened. So half the school was like, oh, this is so bad. We're courtship or like, whatever your family rules are. And there's a lot of different family rules on what is romantically appropriate. So half the class is like, oh, this is terrible. And half the class is, this is great. People should fall in love in high school. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I had to talk to the students about it, particularly this one class. So how do we do that in a way that's not like I'm afraid to have this conversation that I don't want. This wasn't in my job description that I would be teaching kids about PDA. But here's how I approached it, and maybe the story will be helpful. I could just be like, knock it off. How dare you guys do this at my school, right? Or it's like, I could be like, well, according to Rule 7.3, no touching shall happen between the areas of, I could do that. Well, that probably wouldn't serve them. But what I really figured out is like, let's just have a real conversation with them. And so I started, and I came about it from an indirect approach. And it's like, should students at school, should Christian kids or teenagers wear Taylor Swift t-shirts? Should Christians wear Taylor Swift shirts? Thoughts? Yes or no?
I don't know.
Thoughts?
No.
I would say no too.
Thoughts? Thoughts?
Probably not.
Okay, so my class was a little bit divided.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, next question. Should kids wear Taylor Swift t-shirts at school? No. Why? And one kid was like, well, because she's a bad woman. I'm like, no, that's not it. And another kid's like, because we have a dress code. I'm like, yes, because we have a dress code. We simply have a rule that we wear this and not that. And we don't have to have a moral conversation whether this is good. It's simply a rule that we decided, and we have the authority to make this rule, that this is good. And then we had to have the conversation like, do you tell your friend that his zipper is down? And it's like, yes. Nobody wants to have that conversation like, hey, your fly's down. But it's cruel not to have that conversation.
Right.
So here's the two principles I want. We can have rules without deciding whether people are right or wrong or morally good or thing at school. And two, we can talk about embarrassing things at school. So here's the question is, we do not allow PDA out at school. That is a family decision, whether you're allowed to date or what's appropriate PDA. We've made a blanket rule that we don't have it at school. Just like our dress code, that's okay for us. We have the authority to make that rule. Please follow it. Also, we're going to talk about this because you guys are all talking about it. I wanted you to know exactly what the school's position. I didn't want them saying, you know, the school believes this, the school believes that. And I think that was super helpful at the secondary level where they have the ability to think and have real conversation with that. And it stopped me from being the head of school that's like, all I care about is whether your shirt is tucked in and buttoned perfectly, right? And I'm not a head of school that doesn't care whatever you do at school, right? So those are the two dishes I try to avoid. And I think that's a long story to get to. Like, we can't be afraid to have these sort of conversations, but we also have to do it in a way that's like real and not disingenuous of like, these kids are having this conversation anyways. Let's speak some wisdom into it. So hopefully that's maybe a little bit longer in the story to help. But yeah. Okay, not getting help is another one. Try managing everything without involving admin. So how do you guys handle secondary discipline issues at the secondary level? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, in the classroom, we've talked, you know, every year, you know, at teacher training especially, but also in staff meetings, we'll regularly touch upon scenarios and standards and reminders about keeping sharp, you know, in that area of classroom management. So, I mean, much of it we try to, you know, we give lots of different, try to provide tools for the tool belt, you know, for the different tactics, different meat points of wisdom, and lots of conversations with teachers about it one-on-one too. But, you know, basically, yeah, it has the flow of handling things in the classroom, and then if it, you know, if it goes to the next level and you have, it's bad enough, right? Then what'll happen is any number of things. Okay, it's kind of like basically wisdom dictates a lot of it,
Right.
But certainly comes to me, you know, if things are getting pretty hairy and, you know, want to be available to the teachers about that. But sometimes I'm encouraging teachers to actually contact the father. It's like I regularly want them to get on the phone, because I have found that to be quite effective over the years. Get on the phone. No, don't be impersonal. No text. Sometimes email, but I found phone is way more personal. And personal with the dad is definitely, it doesn't mean it solves everything, but it's the right person to contact, especially. So that's kind of a big go-to thing right there.
We could talk about that for a while. That's interesting, because I actually use a different approach, and we will send emails, and I like emails because I like to just get the facts in the communication.
Sure.
Without implying motive, which is, I think, really important. This is what happened at school. Can you please address it with discipline as you see appropriate? And it allows me to collect my thoughts and be dispassionate.
Yeah.
And just stick to the fact. Now, I tend to write most of the emails for higher offenses, and lower offenses, the teachers will write them. And we have varying skill sets of teachers writing emails. That's interesting, the concept of because sometimes you send an email and it just like lands.
I want to say though that, I mean, most of what happens is emails home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of like
Yeah.
most of course, you know, most of what happens is direct reproof to the student right there in the classroom.
Yeah.
But then, you know, if it's bad enough, then the teacher will usually so for clarity, usually that's what it'll do is it'll be email home. But
Yeah.
sometimes of course we have the situation, as you full well could imagine, where emails go home, you don't hear back at all. It's like, okay, right.
Then you're meeting them in the pickup line, then you're phone calling them. Yeah. Okay. So does everybody feel like sending a student to the office is used well and frequently enough? I say it that way because one of the things I work in my school, I feel like lots of times teachers will bring problems to me and like, I don't know what to do with this. I have this kid, he keeps doing this. He's not like, I'm like, did you send him out of this classroom? No. Did you send him to the office? No. And a lot of times they get really worked up and frustrated and they haven't used the tools that are there. Because we want you to teach and the student obviously needs extra correction that you're not able to give fully. So maybe that's different culture and personality at our school. But I feel like I'm constantly like trying to get the teachers to use my office.
I do feel like I don't send a lot of students to the office because if I do send them outside, it's kind of like it's handled, I guess, and like I mean for the most part, and then they won't do it again that day.
Yeah.
Or I'll have a lot of trouble with things that are so minor that I'm not gonna be like, stop it, like, and it's not worthy to be sent out. But then those are so consistent. But then it feels so silly getting on those things. Yeah. And I definitely get stuck on the little things.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think we've made some good strides the past few years with classroom management and discipline. We did have some pretty difficult students a few years ago, and in the history of our school, some of it has to do with this, like some of the more higher level difficult stuff. I mean, Kim could tell you, more about that because she was part of the school at that time. But a lot of those students left. I mean, we have a good bunch of kids. I mean, there's definitely, that doesn't mean all of them are like, surfing the clouds of great piety. I mean, there's still plenty of issues.
Yeah.
But I feel like it seems like we've improved our game of, a lot of the lower school teachers will, have students step out. And Jana's very strong in classroom management and discipline, and she's helped a lot of the lower school teachers kind of have like a good like funnel for like, you do this, and so I've seen a lot of the teachers like implement that, which has been good. Caitlin is strong. I mean, I think you have a good working with the students, and they respect that. They know that you're not a pushover, and that's a good thing. But we're always trying to improve our game,
it's just nature of man that we're working with. So it's like it's not like I can be like, hey, do this and you'll have a perfect classroom.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's also our responsibility to deal with it. If that makes sense, right? Yeah. It's like this is why they come to this school, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, it is the academics, but really it's the virtue. Mm-hmm. It's really like at the end of the day, they want their kids to be virtuous Christian men and women, right? At least that's what you hope. Yeah. That's what they want. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so really this is the game. And that's hard when you have curriculum, right? And it's an interruption to curriculum. And it's hard to remember, like, the curriculum is serving the purpose of character and virtue and wisdom. And so you correcting someone is the right use of your time. I'd say that, with caveats, you can't spend all day correcting. But, something also we've been working on the next page 12. We expect students to be teachable, cheerful, kind, and obedient. They should express in their speech and demeanor. Do not allow complaining and sulking, right? You can't just like your way through the day nonstop all the time, right? Then there's something is wrong. Something has to be addressed. Disrespect to the teacher. Now, we should not take things personally, and we should not be afraid of a little intellectual judo, but we also don't tolerate disrespect. So you should have a good concept of understanding the difference. And you should not allow yourself to be slighted. Crass or blasphemous speech, right? My favorite story to tell is recess with the younger grades, and I'm hard of hearing, right? Like, so a kid says something, I'm like, did that kid just say that? And I'm like, come over here. And it's like, I heard that wrong. That kid did not say that. He's like, yeah, I said blah blah blah. I'm like, whoa, I did. Well, you did say that. All right, we're good enough. But I was shocked that that kid said it because usually I think probably you don't hear that all that often. Now, I will say you do have to watch out for, and it is a truth that like kids will have double lives. So you'll have some kids that are like maybe one way at school, and you know they're using very different language outside of school. That's not either here or there. Like we're not responsible for that outside of school and stuff like that. But no, that is part of school life, right? Like that's we still have to continue and help them. We had to explain the joke. That's what she said to our kids, right? Because kids will pick up cultural things and not know it. I'm like, do you know what this means? Let me explain the context. Unfortunately, it's like teaching kids to use deodorant. Like, sorry, I thought you were going to get this at home. Clearly, you didn't. You need to wear deodorant to come to class, right? There's just things you're going to have to teach kids that you have to teach them. They didn't know. They didn't know what that word meant. Unkind word or action towards fellow students. Non-participation, careless or sloppy work. Laying your head down on the desk is my pet peeve, and it's like total disregard. Hoodies, we ban that from school because they like hide in their hoodie.
Right.
That sort of non-participation, it'd be very easy as a teacher to gloss over and not worry about. But it really influences the culture of the classroom, and it's a drag on the kids that really want to be here and learn. It's always like, is this going to be on the test? That sort of stuff. Now, it's an interesting concept. It's hard to know how long you persevere with a student and when to let a student go, right? It's not like, we're not going to go through a season of hard times with kids. It is very hard to fail out of our school or to get out of our school. But when it's time, it's time. I had a fun experience with a student. I finally had to sit him down and talk to him. It's like, look, if you keep on going on the path that you're going, you're going to be pumping people's gas for the rest of your life. You have like no drive and vision. You're not doing any of your responsibilities. Like this is what life is going to look like for you. I'm sorry no one else has told you this in your life yet, but let's have this talk. And you have until Christmas to start applying yourself. And you can fail forward at school for a long time. So you can fail. I don't care about your grades. You can fail, but fail in a good direction, moving forward versus just failing. And so I had this guy, I thought, I was wise, I was eloquent, I laid it out for him. I thought this was going to go great. My Thanksgiving break had stopped everything, like turning in anything, doing any work. Because what he heard was, if I don't do it by Christmas, I'm out of here. And I'm like, wow, you did not take that the way I thought you were going to take it. Like you took the wrong lesson from what I was laying down for you, kid. But that was his choice. Like I couldn't make him do the work. He chose to interpret that thing of like, I am not going to do the work. And so by Thanksgiving, I ended up calling the mom and like, hey, he's not working. We don't need another few weeks of like no participation. So we let him go on Thanksgiving. And that's a sad story, but it's also a necessary story for the health of the school. So I would encourage you to think about the demeanor of your students and encourage them the proper demeanor, with also knowing their humanity. So I remember a time when my church, the church board kind of collapsed. And, a few of our teachers were from our church, and we're just like, oh man, I wonder if we're going to have a church anymore. This is a church I grew up in, right? So I got to go to school the next day. Everybody has like 1,000-yard stare, and we're like, oh, what's happening? Like my mind was not on my work a whole lot. it was probably not the best day of idea that we've ever produced, right? Like everybody's shell shocked. Kids are the same way, right? So if a kid's going through like a family split, or if mom and dad were fighting horrifically last night, and it comes there and like that kid is just like staring out the window. That's not a discipline issue in the same sense. Like you got to understand the humanity of the person. Like they're gonna have good times and hard times and bad times. We had a student that's just not doing stuff, not shooting stuff in, or the teachers are getting frustrated, like, oh, she does not care. And then we found out, her uncle had hit her grandma that was getting like doing meth probably. It's like, how is a kid supposed to like turn in great work when she's worried about her grandma? Right? So like it's easy to misinterpret things. So that's not an excuse not to discipline, but I think it's super important to remember the humanity. And there's so many things that we start by asking. Like, hey, did you get permission to use your cell phone? It's like, oh yeah, I had an important appointment. I needed to call my mom, and this person said that I could use my cell phone right now. Yeah. Versus like, put that away while you know the rules.
You're leading with a question, just not presuming that they're like, yeah.
In the upper grades, I think that's so important to like assume that they're doing the right thing and ask questions. Hey, why aren't you in class right now? Are you helping? Like, I don't know, whatever it is. I think I've saved myself from saying the wrong thing so many times by asking a question and assuming that I know you're a good kid. Like, I know you're doing the right thing most of the time. So I don't know. That's just some tips. We have a little bit of time. Do you guys have any questions?
I have one real quick, and I definitely want them to be able to ask something that's on their mind. But what do you expect of your students across your upper school in terms of students that love to draw and to doodle and to and all the excuses that they use to justify that? How do you approach that in your school?
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, I know. I've seen two examples of it. Sometimes it's okay; it should be teacher directed. So I'm not opposed to that. What we found is that 90% of the time it was doing it at the wrong time, and it was justified by the parent or things of that nature where it was a distraction or it was an excuse not to pay attention or it really didn't serve the purpose for the student. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think what you have to do is have what they should be doing. So you should be taking Cornell notes, or you should be listening, or there should be something they should be doing instead of that.
Yeah.
If you're just monologuing up at the top of the thing with a 14-point outline that they don't have to copy or anything like that, like you're inducing that.
Right.
Like they're just trying to be busy while like they're just gonna bombard stuff. I've had a really bad where they were drawing. A student was drawing